For most of history, global trade did not fail because of demand. It failed because of movement. Goods existed. Markets existed. Empires existed. What did not exist was reliable motion. Trade was constrained not by ambition, but by propulsion. Welcome to Fiscal Historian. This channel analyzes infrastructure, power, and economic systems as mechanisms, not narratives. Subscribing ensures these structures are examined before their consequences become normalized. The common belief is that global trade expanded because societies became more connected. That globalization followed ideas, diplomacy, or commerce itself. The structure runs in the opposite direction. Trade scaled because ships became predictable. To understand this, we first need to understand what propulsion actually is. Ship propulsion is not a technical detail. It is a constraint system. It determines how far cargo can travel, how reliably it arrives, how often routes can operate, how much can be moved at once, and how capital is locked during transit. Every one of these variables shapes economic behavior. Before industrialization, wind propulsion dominated maritime trade. Sail-based systems were powerful but conditional. Ships moved only when wind allowed, routes aligned with seasonal currents. Schedules were estimates, not commitments. This imposed a specific economic structure. Trade favored high-margin goods, spices, silks, precious metals. Bulk commodities moved rarely and slowly. Capital was tied up for months or years. Risk was constant. Insurance was expensive. Economic systems adapted accordingly. Production remained localized. Inventories were large. Scarcity was normal. States projected power through geography. Strategic ports mattered more than throughput. Naval strength depended on seamanship, artillery, and weather knowledge. This system was stable because it had limits. Those limits broke with industrialization. Factories changed the equation. Industrial production created continuous output. Raw materials had to arrive on schedule. Finished goods had to leave immediately. Seasonal shipping could not support this. This is where the logic shifts. Steam propulsion emerged not to replace sail, but to break dependency. Steam engines allowed ships to move independent of wind. Routes became selectable. Timetables became possible. At first, steam was inefficient. Coal was bulky. Fuel costs were high. Refueling infrastructure was sparse. Steamships operated where predictability justified expense. Short routes, rivers, canals, high-value cargo lanes. This created a hybrid system. Sail handled volume, steam handled time. The economic consequences were immediate. Regular schedules reduced risk. Lower risk reduced insurance costs. Lower insurance costs expanded viable trade. Capital turnover accelerated. Factories could plan. Merchants could price accurately. States could rely on supply. Naval power changed alongside commerce. Steam navies no longer waited for favorable winds. Force projection became continuous. This tied industrial capacity directly to military reach. But steam propulsion carried structural limits. Coal logistics constrained range. Maintenance was complex. Crew requirements were high. As scale increased, inefficiency reappeared. Diesel propulsion resolved this. Internal combustion engines dramatically improved fuel efficiency. Range increased. Reliability improved. Crew sizes fell. Diesel propulsion transformed shipping economics. Cost per ton-mile collapsed. At this point, the system stops behaving the way people expect. Shipping ceased to be about route viability. It became about volume optimization. Bigger ships, fewer stops, lower marginal costs. This enabled a second transformation, containerization. Standardized containers eliminated manual cargo handling. Loading times collapsed. Ports became industrial nodes. Propulsion enabled scale. Containers enabled coordination. Together, they compressed global logistics. Distance became secondary to timing. Manufacturing decentralized. Components crossed oceans multiple times. Just-in-time supply chains replaced buffers. This was not ideological globalization. It was mechanical. Institutions evolved with these systems. Naval states invested in shipyards and engines. Ports expanded into logistics complexes. Shipping lines consolidated. Military and commercial fleets remained linked. Fuel access became strategic. Choke points became critical. This concentration increased efficiency. It also increased fragility. This detail is often ignored, but it changes everything. Modern supply chains are propulsion systems extended inland. Factories, warehouses, and retailers operate on maritime timing. When propulsion falters, economies seize. Understanding this reframes modern vulnerabilities: fuel shocks, port congestion, canal blockages. These are not anomalies, they are inherited constraints. The uncomfortable truth is that propulsion shaped economic power more than policy ever did. States that controlled engines, fuel, ports, and logistics gained leverage. Others adapted or declined. This system does not wait for public understanding. Firms adjust routes immediately. Capital reallocates first. Prices respond later. By the time shortages are discussed, flows have already shifted. This asymmetry is structural, and it continues. Energy transitions, emissions rules, and geopolitical friction all act on the same underlying mechanism. Ship propulsion remains the hidden architecture of globalization. The question is not whether it will change, it is how much instability that change introduces before coordination catches up. What follows diesel dominance is often described as maturity. In reality, it is saturation. Once propulsion, containerization, and port infrastructure aligned, global trade reached a mechanical ceiling defined not by demand, but by coordination tolerance. At that point, marginal gains no longer came from moving faster. They came from moving more with fewer buffers. To understand why modern supply chains look fragile, we have to understand what problem late-stage propulsion systems were solving. The original problem was distance. That problem was already solved. The new problem was cost compression. As shipping became predictable, competition intensified, margins narrowed, volume became the only lever left. This is where institutional behavior changed. Shipping firms consolidated, ports specialized, routes standardized. Flexibility declined by design. A ship optimized for container throughput is not adaptable. A port optimized for scale cannot easily reroute flows. A supply chain optimized for efficiency resists redundancy. This was not mismanagement. It was rational optimization under propulsion-enabled conditions. Capital rewarded throughput. Financial models assumed continuity. Risk was priced as statistically negligible. This is where the population lag begins. From the outside, global trade appeared resilient. Goods were cheap. Availability was constant. From the inside, buffers were thinning. This system rewarded early movers. Large firms negotiated long-term shipping contracts. States invested in dominant ports and canals. Energy suppliers aligned with maritime fuel demand. Smaller actors adapted later, or not at all. This is the elite sequencing rule in operation. Those closest to logistics constraints respond first. Those furthest downstream experience effects last. When disruptions occur, the narrative focuses on events, storms, accidents, conflicts. The structural cause is propulsion dependence. Modern trade assumes uninterrupted motion. When motion slows, everything upstream is exposed. At this point, political theater diverges from financial reality. Public discourse emphasizes sovereignty, resilience, or reform. Capital reallocates quietly. Shipping insurance reprices risk. Firms adjust inventory policies. States reassess choke points. These decisions happen before public consensus forms. By the time shortages reach consumers, outcomes are already locked in. This pattern repeats because the system executes automatically. No coordination is required, no agreement is necessary. Incentives align behavior. This is why debates about globalization often miss the mechanism. Global trade did not integrate because nations trusted each other. They integrated because propulsion made fragmentation expensive. Reversing that integration is not a policy choice, it is a mechanical one. Energy transitions highlight this constraint. Diesel propulsion sits at the center of modern trade. It is efficient, scalable, and standardized. Alternative propulsion systems face structural hurdles: fuel density, infrastructure compatibility, fleet conversion timelines. These are not ideological barriers, They are engineering constraints with economic consequences. As these pressures increase, the system will not collapse dramatically. It will adjust asymmetrically. Some routes will remain viable, others will degrade. Costs will reappear where efficiency once erased them. The population will interpret this as volatility. Institutions will interpret it as repricing. This difference in perception matters, because understanding always arrives after adaptation. This is the uncomfortable structural truth. Ship propulsion did not just enable globalization. It encoded its limits. Every efficiency gain removed slack. Every scale increase amplified dependency. The modern economy is not fragile by accident, it is precise, and precision has no tolerance for interruption. As propulsion systems evolve again, the same pattern will repeat. Early actors will adjust quietly, capital will move ahead of narratives, public understanding will arrive later, framed as inevitability. By the time outcomes feel obvious, they will already be complete. This is not a warning, it is a description. Ship propulsion remains the hidden infrastructure beneath economic power, and as long as goods move by sea, it will continue to shape the world before anyone agrees that it has. Welcome to the Logic of Systems. This has been Fiscal Historian.